All right, the 10 a.m. Beijing time, and then 10 p.m. New York time, and 3 p.m. and Chris Sheldon's time in UK from GSK. Today is my great pleasure to have Chris as our guest in our second episode of a BioVerse, where science sparks business. It's our honor to have Chris, and today I think we would have so much to learn from Chris, and we would also exchange a lot of great information, and I also expect a very vivid discussion with Chris. Before we get started, let me just give you a quick introduction of who we are, why we are here, and what you can expect today. So this is a BioVerse, which is a monthly webinar co-produced by Sapa GP and the Insan Trust community. Let me give you a few quick slides about who we are, so you will be on the same page as we are. Just give me 1 second. Let me just load down the slides. All right. All right, so here we go. Quick word about who we are. First of all, like I said, this webinar, BioVerse monthly webinar, is co-produced by Sapa GP and the Insan Trust community. Who is Sapa GP? I think if you are ethnic Chinese and have been working in the pharmaceutical industry for long enough, you probably know Sapa is the oldest and probably most established ethnic Chinese focused global pharmaceutical professional associations, and GP, which means a great Philly. It's the chapter with the headquarters in Philadelphia, where is the birthplace and cell and gene therapy. So what do we do? Like I said right here, this is just a chapter, Philly chapter. Sapa as a whole actually have a lot bigger membership as well as a much bigger, broader geographic locations. We just focus on GP, Philadelphia chapter. They may go for Sapa GPs really have four major objectives. First, promote the pharmaceutical science and technology. And second, contribute to public health education. Third, facilitate scientific and business collaboration. And finally, help people advance their career. That's really the four major goals of a Sapa GP. Also apply to the Sapa in general. Oh, by the way, Sapa just celebrated their 30th birthday. I believe 2 weeks ago in New Jersey. Many of us actually attended the celebration. Like I said, Sapa's core activities really have three parts. First, serve our members. Second, serve science. And then finally, our webinar's tagline indicates, we try to use science to spark business, because in the end, in the US, as we all know, pharmaceutical industry is important as it's a very important part of the GDP and also business to help not only patient, but also as many business owners and create a lot of employment for this country and around the world. That's about Sapa GP. Let's get into the Insan Trust community. We're relatively young. Like I mentioned, the Sapa is well established, have been around for right now more than 30 years. But for us, we just officially launched a little bit over 1 year ago. What do? We really try to, bring the business aspect of ethnic Chinese, especially Asian biotech communities. Hopefully, we can make a bigger contribution to the global pharmaceutical industries. What do we leverage? Really have three major pillars. The first one, as we are speaking today, is a BioVerse, which is a collaboration, like I mentioned, between Insan Trust community and Sapa. We just list the previous episode we did with Catherine Pierce, and we expect today's webinar probably can attract more live audience. That's the first pillar. Second one, we also have a weekly newsletter. Right now, we have over 1,000 subscribers. And one thing we are really proud of is that we have our readers are really loyal. Actually, the latest data coming in, the email open rate already reached 62%. So we're getting better and better. So the third one is really kind of have a unique feature as I would say, Asian biotech community, because a lot of Asians use WeChat as I would say, communication tool of choice for business communication. So we did have We have created a pretty robust WeChat-based community. Right now have 5 focused groups, and we have more than 1,500 unique members across 5 different groups. If you are interested in joining any of those 3 pillars or like any one of our WeChat group, please feel free to contact us. With that being said, this is get out of our way. I'll stop here for probably like 10 seconds. If you want to take a screenshot or you want, so later on you can revisit this page. And like I said, if you are interested in joining either Sapa GP or Insan Trust community, please reach out to us after webinar. We are very, very happy to take people share this interest with us to become part of our communities. All right, this is a brief introduction, get out the way. Now let's get into the host. Now I will say the VIP today, Chris. Let me start with a little bit of introduction of Chris. When I first looked at his resume, I was like, wow, that's really, really impressive. Why do I say that? Let me just read a little bit Chris' bio before he started his presentation. So for people just dialing in, didn't have a chance to read Chris' bio. So Chris right now is a senior vice president and head of a BD for GSK based in UK. Chris and his team are responsible for all of GSK's business development activities globally, covering the scouting, evaluation, transaction, and alliance management of all new investment opportunities. Chris and his team led the recent $2 billion acquisition of Bellus Health for Acalabrutinib in refractory chronic cough to add to GSK's respiratory medicines portfolio. And in addition, a licensing deal with the WuXi Biologics, which many of us are probably really familiar, for multiple novel bi and multi-specific T-cell engagers in oncology. Prior to this, Chris worked in UK and AstraZeneca for over 19 years. Chris held the role of a vice president and head of Oncology BD in oncology research and development, as well as a vice president and head of investor relations. Chris and his team led the valuation and investment cases for AZ's major $6.9 billion and $6 billion clinical stage co-development and co-promotion deals with Daiichi for Enhertu and the DS82. I think the second one is more like known as Dato-Dxd, which is top 2 ADC, both novel antibody drug conjugate ADCs. Chris also led AZ $6.4 billion acquisition of Acerta Pharma for Acalabrutinib, a best-in-class BTK inhibitor in hematology. As you know, Beijing, which is probably the most influential China biotech company, also have a molecule in this against this target. Before Chris' BD career, Chris worked in discovery research and AZ as a senior research chemist. He also holds a PhD in chemistry from the University of Bristol, UK, and a first-class honors degree from the University of Sheffield, UK. Wow, such an impressive resume. So with that being said, now it's my great honor to hand the baton to Chris, and then Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Leon. That's a very generous introduction, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here at this Science Sparks Business event. Just in case anyone was in any doubt, I don't actually get any royalties from the book For Blood and Money Leon mentioned in the newsletter, but it was very nice to be name dropped a couple of times. I actually wasn't interviewed for the book, but for those of you who haven't read it, I think it's a very interesting story about how difficult it is actually to get drugs to market, how difficult it is for investors, the BD teams, the physicians, and how it really took the whole community, the whole ecosystem to come together to see the 2 BTK inhibitors approved, Ibuprofen and Calquence. Anyway, like I said, I don't get any royalties, so please feel free to read the book. Okay, where shall I start? I wanted just to kind of level set with a bit of background, that the need for business development. I think everyone's probably well aware there is a loss of exclusivity period affecting the entire pharmaceutical industry. This is just one visualization of it, actually. So as you can see on the footnote, this is from one sell-side analyst that I shared this from Wolf Research. It's not perfect because it only looks at inline on marketed drugs. So by virtue of only looking at that one parameter, all of these lines will decline. It doesn't look at future pipeline drugs, and so that's excluded from this analysis. So it's completely normal that drugs and medicines come off patent. It's part of the innovation cycle. But I think what's interesting when you look at these two graphs, the left-hand slide being the 5-year horizon and the 10-year horizon, you can see actually on the left, Pfizer and Amgen, you can see how they had a nearer term loss of exclusivity phenomena they were trying to address, and probably explains actually why they've acted so quickly this year. Obviously, Amgen with the acquisition of Horizon for a thyroid eye disease drug Tepezza, and I think everyone's followed that story with the FTC. That was a $29 billion acquisition, which finally got through the FTC the other week. And of course, Pfizer acquiring Seattle Genetics for a whole suite of antibody drug conjugates. That was a $43 billion acquisition. And again, just not meaning to single out any single company, but GSK, my employer, for example, we're looking at the very end of the decade. So our BD focus in that context is around revenue generation towards the end of the decade. Having said that, every single company listed on this slide has to create a sustainable portfolio. So we don't just do deals to generate immediate revenue or a perceived loss of revenue. We have to create sustainable pipelines, and that's why I think you see deal making across all stages of the value chain. I'll not spend too long on this slide because I think Leon told me when I sent him my slides late last night, he'd actually flagged this slide as well in his newsletter. I clearly didn't do my homework, Leon, sorry. But yeah, the sector in general, the biotech sector, is definitely in a bear market. There's obviously distress in the market. This slide from a nice slide deck, which Stifel send every Sunday evening, Tim Oppler and team, shows how the number of negative enterprise value life science companies continues to increase, so trading below cash. And I think that will generate and drive also business development as the industry think about creative solutions to this problem. I wanted just to move on now and just share a little bit of a deal-making philosophy, how we identify great business development on the pharma side, and how I try and think about BD in my day-to-day job, and how I try and help instill this mindset in my team and also educate the organizations in which I work. So if you just forgive me the analogy for 1 second, I'm going to use a sporting analogy and what baseball teaches us about great deal making, actually. So those of you who don't follow American baseball like myself, just think cricket in the UK if you've ever followed that. But Ted Williams was arguably the best hitter in US baseball history. He played for the Boston Red Sox. And the way Ted went about the game was in a very methodical and analytical approach. He actually broke down the strike zone into 77 cells, as you can see depicted by circles. And Ted was patient. He didn't swing for every ball that came towards him. He was patient. He waited until the ball was in his sweet spot, which are the orange and red areas you can see here. So my analogy here is you don't see deals announced every day of the week. In fact, you will see companies perhaps waiting long periods of time before they act, and they're waiting to act because they're waiting till they have conviction. So when Ted had conviction. He swung when the ball was in the orange and red circles, and when he did so, his hit rate was 40/100. So Ted hit the ball about 40% of the time. When he swung for everything, his hit rate was about 2300. So hit the ball about 23% of the time. So you're probably thinking, those of you who think the head of BD at GSK has lost the plot, just bear with me, and I'll try and bring that to life now in the deal making arena in the healthcare sector we're in. So here is our strike zone. It's a combination of science, finance, and of course culture. Scientific fit is, what's first in class, best in class science? Is there an unmet need? Does the clinical data support beating future standard of care? And sometimes you don't know. You're trying to think what the standard of care might change to in 10 years' time. We have shareholders. We have to make a return on our investment. The deals have to be well structured and create a return on investment. So deal structuring is very important. We don't do deals where the economics outweigh the scientific reward. And of course, culture. I think culture is very, very important, and people often misunderstand this. It's like any marriage. Marriages are difficult. Relationships are difficult. Partnerships between two companies are difficult, and you really need that alignment of the culture, the right vision for the asset, the molecule, what you're trying to develop. And it's at the intersection of these, which I think is the sweet spot. So obviously, Ted, with the baseball analogy, is that, and by doing so, we have the increased odds of value creation. If we're reckless, if we're off balance, if we venture away from these zones, you can have undifferentiated medicines, which the world doesn't need. We can have cultural clashes where the two companies can't get along and generate the data and the value needed to push the medicine forwards. And of course, value destruction if the financial fit is incorrect. So a bit of a simplification, but I think it's an important context as to how people are thinking on the pharma side when we're evaluating new projects. Okay, wanted to now explain a little bit about GSK's strategy and our therapeutic areas of focus. Like most pharmaceutical companies, we have a focus strategy. We're focused on 4 key therapeutic areas, specifically in diseases where there's patient need for novel vaccines or therapeutics. Our R&D strategy leverages our expertise across vaccines and specialty medicines to seek out new differentiated opportunities in diseases with high patient need aligned to these 4 areas. So going from left to right, you can see we're one of the few pharmaceutical companies still active in infectious disease, where we're an industry leader actually, with 2/3 of our pipeline focused in this area, driving new vaccines and medicines across challenging diseases like RSV, like hepatitis B, and more. And you can see there a couple of vaccines mentioned at the bottom, Shingrix vaccine and the RSV vaccine, or XV. In fact, it's quite topical. My deal slides out of date already, Leon, as you pointed out to me, with the deal that was announced just yesterday, actually, with a company, considering this audience, you'll all know well, with WuXi Biologics products to co-promote our shingles vaccine in China. And increase the points of vaccination available to GSK to the 30,000 which are available in the country versus the 9,500 we can currently target. HIV, moving from left to right, we're seeking opportunities to further evolve the treatment landscape here through longer acting prevention and treatment regimens. Immunology and respiratory diseases, again, expanding our leadership position in areas such as eosinophilic driven diseases, respiratory diseases, lupus, and investigating potential solutions also for things, neurological conditions such as dementia and Alzheimer's. And then finally, on the right-hand side, where I've spent most of my career actually in the world of oncology, this is an emerging area for GSK. We have key research focusing, I guess, on two research pillars, which is tumor-targeted therapies, which would be things like antibody-drug conjugates, bispecific antibodies, which Leon also kindly mentioned in the introduction. We have a collaboration with WuXi Biologics in China looking at detuned CD3 T-cell engagers, which we're thrilled about, and a great collaborator. And then emerging areas such as immuno-oncology and synthetic lethality. And this internal strategy is the same as the BD strategy, by the way. People sometimes ask me, what's the BD strategy? Well, we only have one strategy as a company, and it can be supported through the external piece, looking beyond our own four walls, and the organic piece, the things we can deliver ourselves internally. This was just, I guess, a couple of bragging rights, just to show you we have been very active in the last 2 years, even before my arrival at GSK. I think, like most pharma, we're very curious, we're very cognizant that the innovation outside of our own four walls is always going to be greater than the innovation within. The world is just a large place, right? And that geographic diversity around the world. Yet we've been very active. I think everyone knows our contribution to the COVID pandemic with Xevudy, sotrovimab, which was a COVID antibody in collaboration with Vir. Sierra Oncology was a deal which gave us access to a JAK kinase inhibitor, a JAK inhibitor for myelofibrosis. And actually that just received US FDA approval a couple of weeks ago now. Affinivax in the vaccine space, looking at a multiple antigen presentation system. New modalities, again, back to my point earlier, it's not just about late stage deals such as Sierra, which led to a FDA approval within a year of the deal. Wave Life Sciences is looking at novel modalities, oligonucleotides actually, and a very early stage collaboration there. WuXi Biologics, I think we've already touched on. And then Leon mentioned in his introduction the Bellus Health deal resulting in a product in phase 3 development for chronic cough, actually, which is a nice fit versus our respiratory franchise. I thought it would be remiss of me if I didn't use the opportunity just to talk about a few observations of China landscape. So you can see the sources labeled on these slides. This is just a simple pull from Evaluate Pharma, but oncology, maybe this is out of date actually now, since analysts haven't updated some of their models, I guess, with the new and emerging obesity drugs, which everyone will be aware of from Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. But oncology still, to this date, is one of the fastest growing, if not largest, therapy areas. You can see the CAGRs on the bottom right, actually 2021 to 2028, 12%, and worldwide sales predicted to be almost 400 billion actually by 2028. When you dissect that further, and I think this explains a couple of deal trends we've been seeing in China, and I think your next presenter next week, Leon, or whenever your next webcast is, may be talking specifically around the ADC space. So I hope I don't steal any of their thunder. But actually antibody drug conjugates, so the concept of smart chemotherapy, delivering chemotherapy more precisely through linking it to an antibody target. Actually, if you look at analyst projections, again, this is Evaluate Pharma poll. So this is not GSK modeling, this is just looking at consensus of sell-side analysts tracking the various companies. That's forecast actually to be double the CAGR of the oncology CAGR from 22 to 28 of 10% and 23% for antibody drug conjugates. And that growth is rather unprecedented. And I think there's a few things, again, to tease out of why these have become a popular modality. these things tend to have higher probability of success. So I guess contrasting to immuno-oncology, where you can dose hundreds, if not thousands of patients before you know if you have a clinical signal, these are highly potent modalities delivering precisely chemotherapies directly to the tumor. And you can see, again, if you look at the little box on the left-hand side, the approval rates, again, historically in oncology have been about 5%. And again, if you look at ADCs to date, obviously far fewer tested, but we think that probability is almost double. And that explains, I think, what you will then see on this slide, and something that you're probably all familiar with, the plethora of deals we've actually seen from west to east, from China into the hands of global pharma players. And this was a little bit of internal analysis, but China really has become the second largest source of clinical oncology drugs and the largest source of antibody drug conjugates, if you believe this analysis. And that's all been secured through business development. I won't go through you have the slides, you can see it on the screen. You can see, again, from the 21 to 23 period with Duality Bio and KeyMed being the most recent players, partnering with AstraZeneca and BioNTech and Beijing, respectively. Leon asked me if I'd give a few tips to this audience, perspectives from inside pharma and for biotech partnering with pharma. So I guess my perspectives from inside pharma is as follows. So agility is absolutely critical. BD is best described, I think, as a competitive sport. If an asset is really good, there'll be multiple suitors for it. So agility is important. So on my side of the table, what I like to explain to my teams and to leadership is we need to very quickly understand what a particular opportunity is, what it could achieve, what it might not be able to achieve as well. And you'll see how you guys can help, actually on my next slide, by marrying up the expectations of biotech with pharma. We only raise leadership attention to projects once we've gained conviction. Back to the Ted Williams analogy before, if we don't have conviction, we don't swing. And if you go prematurely to a governance interaction in pharma or to leadership and you don't have all the answers to the question, doubt can sometimes start spreading like a virus, and you end up not getting deals done. So that's why I think it's important to realize sometimes on the pharma side, we might ask for more information, and it's because we're trying to get to the point of conviction. I'm quite keen also on minimizing over-analysis, endless desk work, death by committees. So sometimes it's easy to focus on an ocean boil when actually there's 2 or 3 critical things actually you just need to understand. Again, back to the agility point and the competitive nature of the industry. The external universe really doesn't conform to any one particular company's internal dynamics. So again, need to be agile. I think there's a real need to be transparent. So I'd like to think when myself and my teams provide feedback to potential partners, we do so with the hope, excuse me, my screen has just gone off for a second, so hopefully I can get it back on. Yes, I'm back, sorry. We hope people can understand why we're asking for certain information, where we're up to with our decision making, what it might take to de-risk the opportunity further for us to engage further. And then the bit people often don't talk about is back to the fact partnerships are complex, so you really need robust integration and alliance management. We celebrate deals once we announce them, but honestly, no one really benefits until we generate value and ultimately get new products to patients with unmet need. So yeah, avoiding value creation, passing that baton on to the teams that then must deliver the business development ambition that was in the business case to enable development of a particular asset. And again, truth-seeking behaviors, I think, underline all of this. So on the biotech side, hopefully that provides context. In order for us to articulate the opportunity clearly internally, I think it's important that biotechs are clear and concise. I, believe it or not, have been sent patents in German before. It's really difficult to articulate something like that to senior leadership and to build a credible business case. So try and make it as easy as you can for us. Be bold. You know, if you think, dream big. If you think this could deliver transformational step change efficacy, say so. But I would also say just temper it and be candid with the limitations as well. Ultimately, any pharmaceutical company is going to do diligence. We're going to dig deep. And so if there are gaps and limitations, I would just say call them out, because it helps us to focus on the things where we need to understand further. I would say be patient. We're bigger than you. Pharmaceutical companies can be upwards of 100,000 employees. We probably have more layers. It's a little difficult at times just to knock on the door of the chief scientific officer. I know it's easier said than done, but in the smaller company, that's possible. So, you know, things can take a little bit more time. Don't give up, I would say. If somebody tells you something's not on strategy, ask them why. Get some feedback. Is it because you don't have a commercial footprint? Is it because it's a disease area we don't have clinical operations and expertise in? I think it's important to try and insist on the pharma partner to get feedback so you can come back stronger. And actually, deal making is a stepwise process. Again, for blood and money. Those of you that have read it, you'll recognize this. Sometimes the answer is initially no, but then through that dialogue can then lead to deal making. Again, don't make things hard for us. Don't insist on non-binding offers, for example, to get to data. I can assure you that we don't engage in CDAs, confidential disclosure agreements, and deal-making discussions just to get access to information we wouldn't normally get access with. This is a time-consuming process. So I would say assume good intent and people are acting in good faith. Yeah, and then finally, as you get into the nuts and bolts of any particular transaction and deal, just try and be solution orientated. It's very easy for sometimes the lawyers to run amok. Can be point scoring in deal rooms, I've witnessed myself. Deals need to be really simple to understand for the respective alliance management teams to pick up, for the teams to execute on. And so I would say try and be pragmatic and solution oriented, and that works on my side of the table, of course, as well. So hopefully some useful information in there. Maybe just to close out, and then we can go to the important Q&A, where I know you guys will probably derive the most benefit. It's been a pleasure to be here today. At GSK, we do have a bold ambition of uniting science, technology, and talent to get ahead of disease together. This is our purpose. And since becoming a standalone biopharmaceutical company with the separation of the consumer health and Haleon last year, we've set ambitious targets to be a force for change in the health ecosystem. And being very specific, our ambition is to be positively impact the health of 2.5 billion people by 2030. That's a bold target that's reinforced by our commitments to addressing the most challenging infectious disease, as for example, and our global reach to maximize our products in the second half of the decade. I think I may have preempted one of your questions, Leon, but there is a way to contact GSK through our partnering websites as well. I also don't mind if people contact me myself. I don't know if Leon, my contact details are available, but very happy to help navigate a large organization for those of you thinking you have good ideas, assets, medicines that are a good fit versus GSK strategy. So with that, I think I'm more or less on time and allowing a good 25 minutes for Q&A.
Thank you, Chris. That was fantastic. I think you already answered some of the questions the audience will want to ask you. That's a really, really good. So we can leave more time for many more questions. So as a reminder for people who dial in the Zoom call directly, please put your question in Q&A directly. And please include your full name and your affiliation so we have a proper vetting. For people who are listening to this from different platform, please do the same. Feel free to put your question in the chat box or comment box or wherever you are, but do include your name and your affiliation, and our volunteers going to select them and put all of them to us, and we will select the one which can apply to most audience and ask them to Chris. We'll make best use of the time. With that being said, let's just start with some questions we have collected from the pre-registration, as well as they are trickling in during the presentation you just gave, which was fantastic, by the way. So the first question is, what's a typical decision process of innovative drug deal, BD deals in big pharma? I mean, you have been working to big pharma. I think you probably have a little bit general idea. For example, what's the timeline and how many people from big pharma such as GSK and AZ would be involved? Let's say look into the data from the data room. So give people a little bit idea of the time frame and the amount of work they are expecting.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thank you for the question, Leon. So I can say that the perspective I have from AstraZeneca and GSK, it all starts with the disease. We start with the disease area, the unmet need, the current standards of care, and that really derives where the internal portfolio is placed versus that, and then the external universe of where one could play. So disease areas is often the place to start rather than mechanisms. Mechanisms come after the knowledge of the disease area. And I would say teams are usually kept small and focused, actually. If it's a preclinical stage asset, you will front load bioscientists, chemists, if it's a small molecule, into the process. There's definitely less with early deals. And therefore, by virtue, you can often template multiple things. For example, deal terms can be more benchmark related rather than derived through robust modeling. When you're looking at clinical stage opportunities, clinical judgment is very, very important. Beyond the data tables you see at an ASCO or an ESMO or any other medical or scientific meeting, that clinical judgment is key. So teams tend to be bigger. But again, I would say that relatively small can be up to a couple of dozen people on the pharma side by the time you include all the various functions. My view is the more people you involve, the earlier on in a deal, the more reasons you have not to do a deal, actually. So I'm always reminded of how you need to, again, focus on the 2 or 3 critical things, because a due diligence report, I can tell you now, is a one-way ticket to sending you to sleep. It's essentially a risk log of all the reasons not to do a deal. So actually we're incentivized on the pharma side to keep things simple and teams small. However, due diligence, for example, is a necessary process, looking under the floorboards, behind the curtains. Many companies will have procedures internally that you have to do this to be able to go to the board, for example. And teams can get large during the due diligence process, where essentially most functions would have a seat at the table. You might involve global safety colleagues, medical affairs colleagues, thinking about publication plans. Your question specifically, Leon, around timelines, I guess it is challenging, but I've known deals go from, so the Bellus Health deal and GSK, that was 18 days from first non-binding offer to announcing the deal, a $2 billion acquisition. We had done a ton of pre-work in that space. So that clock doesn't quite do that justice, but I would say 4 to 6 months is typically from first interaction to moving through CDA, scoping out the vision for the molecule, passing through due diligence, and allowing for contract negotiating. But some things can take time. I've known examples of a couple of years where you've built trust, a relationship, you've shared information back and forth, and that can also equally work well. So how long's a piece of string? Hopefully that was helpful. Oh, you might be on mute. Sorry, Leon.
Oh, sorry about that. I just wasted the pressure 20 seconds. So I said there's a lot of questions piled up in the Q&A. So I'll try to consolidate them. So go through all of them. So if you're Chris, you can do firecracker style. Let's do a 30 second or 1 minute per question if possible. And if it's not possible, please elaborate as much as you want. So the next question is actually from the audience. Assuming no ethnic difference in incidence and prevalence for disease, for example, chronic acute, what percentage of total deal value would you assign to the Greater China territory? How has that changed over the past 10 years, and how many bigger pharma are still willing to do or even favoring ex-China licensing rights from the China biotech?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. This is a good question, actually. So I would say my experience is we tend to predominantly look at the US, EU, and Japan, and our analytics team would do something what we call the rest of world uplift, which would include China. To be precise, again, assuming no differences in prevalence and things like you say, I would say this is 5 to 10% typically. On your question around China rights, the only comment there, Leon, I would say sometimes that's not an option, right? It's just if you're working with local Chinese companies or in broader Greater China regions, then that might be something that's just not on the table, in which case I think sometimes that's what tends to derive the ex-China rights from the benchmarks I had earlier. Hopefully that keeps it simple.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So next question actually from the pre-registration audience. What are the most common errors you have seen when biotech approach you, especially when China's next known biotech company reach out to GSK or AstraZeneca, in your memory?
Yeah, I would say that. So in general, I think the standard is very high. The quality is very high. I think the one thing just to be mindful of is obviously as an idea becomes an asset, that becomes a medicine, and you think about the production of the actual API or whatever the modality is just thinking about global reach and reputable CDMOs, for example. So manufacturing is critically important, and just thinking about how that can be fit for purpose to enable supply in the rest of the world beyond China. I think that sometimes helps on the pharma side, and sometimes just to be mindful of, like I say, and WuXi, for example, is known as a very credible, capable international CDMO. And so those names you might want to think about early on, which are pharma friendly, I would say.
Perfect. So I'll do alternation, one from the pre-registered audience, one from the live audience. Let's try to see how many we can go through. Just be aware. So next question actually from the live audience. This is from Yu Xinzhang. He's from Luxembourg Biosciences. By the way, in the future, if you want to ask a question, do please include your name and your affiliation. So his question is, what are the general philosophy and driver towards deals on early stage preclinical platform assets?
Yeah, I think, again, this is a good question. I think with, you saw the LOE slide I said, so there's obviously always a natural tendency to gravitate to things with with clinical proof of concept, clinical data, things that can derive revenues this decade. What I would say is those deals, pharma can't get them wrong. I mean, when that's why you don't see mega blockbuster M&A every day of the week, because the right circumstances have to align to get those right, and that intersection of value creation that I shared can be hard. With early stage deal making, you can get these things wrong because you've not got the same magnitude of financial investment at stake. So licensing deals, I think you will see always more frequently than M&A. People say they don't see a lot of platform deals, but honestly, I think you do. The Wave deal that GSK announced, for example, is an example of an asset deal and a platform deal. There's normally a lead program. And I think it's that's transformational science, breaking modalities, and it's having almost a center of excellence in that partner to be able to deliver on what could be meaningful and transformational things in the future. So I'd say most pharma have an eye on both, because at the end of the day, we have to create sustainable pipelines.
Fantastic. So next question is from Juntao Luo. He's from SUNY Upstate Medical University. The question is a little bit general. What is the current trend for immunomodulation drug development? How to pick up the disease start with if you have a compound with a broad spectrum of a toll-like receptor inflammation inhibitions? And do you have a suggestion on which big pharma as a potential industrial partner? I think this is really someone from early, probably not really in the industry yet, just a really kind of academic point of view, want to get some information about this specific area.
Yeah, what I would say, if I understood the question, sorry, I didn't see it written down, but from what most pharma, I think, do a pretty good job in their quarterly earnings presentations or their annual reports at spelling out the areas of focus. So what I didn't say in my slide, actually, and what another tip actually didn't make my slide is ask pharma what they're not interested in. So from a GSK perspective, the area of cardiovascular medicine, obesity is not an area of focus for us, actually, by process of elimination. That would be my tip. But yeah, some of the big immunology players, of course, AbbVie, Sanofi would be J&J. I would say Johnson & Johnson would be good places to start there.
Right. So this one from the pre-registered attendees question, and you probably saw that before. Some people say oncology is overinvested, and they often pointed out that, despite 40% pipeline right now is in oncology, but only 20% of the current revenue come from oncology. What's your opinion on the relative return of investment of oncology versus other disease areas? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, so another good question. And actually, if you look at some of the deal making this year, I think it's apparent there has been a bit of a pivot actually away from oncology to the area of immunology and inflammation. We've seen transactions from Eli Lilly acquiring Dice Therapeutics for small molecule IL-17 inhibitors, and we saw the Merck Prometheus deal as well, actually, for the TL1A for GI and GU. So I think there's no question there's been a little bit of a pivot. I would say the devil's in the detail, though, in oncology. Oncology is multimodality. Obviously, with the IRA, small molecule precision medicine drugs are perceived to be vulnerable because of the IRA, because of the some of these rare mutations, fusions, genomic alterations can be finding a needle in a haystack. And we've seen companies like Roche return assets to Blueprint Medicines, for example. But then this week or this last week, we've seen Eli Lilly acquire Point Therapeutics for nuclear medicine. You heard me talk about antibody drug conjugates. So I think the devil's in the detail in oncology. Yes, a broad pivot to I&I, but I would say some of the more complex modalities, such as nuclear medicine, like the Eli Lilly deal, antibody drug conjugates are still in favor.
Fantastic. So another question, since you're talking about ADC, so your slide already shows some compelling data. I didn't know until today that the CAGR of ADC is more than 20%, right, in the coming years. And so while in oncology on average is 10%, that's pretty impressive. That's good data to have. But also you show that the analyst sales side said the peak sale going to be a little bit over 26 billion based on their kind of forecast period. What's the ultimate peak sale? As a reference, PD-1 65, GLP-1 is like 100 billion. What's a peak sale, ADC, from your kind of a realistic view? So we'll have idea how many we can fit there.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. I wish I had a crystal ball. So honestly, the answer there is I don't know. Evaluate Pharma with the way I pulled that data is it actually only goes to 2028, and then I think the next iteration will be 2030. Obviously, it'll be higher than that number because most ADCs are new. I think we know that many of these ADCs will not only be blockbusters, but potentially multi-blockbusters and even some of the mega blockbusters, if you consider the 5 billion plus category. And I think the Daiichi Sankyo being a great example, actually, of Japan for global innovation there with that technology. And by the way, your pronunciation was very good, Leon, with Dato-Dxd. Earlier, DS1062. I think there's a good chance that multiple ADCs will be in the mega blockbuster category.
Fantastic. So next question.
Sorry, maybe just to add one thing. But I don't think all ADCs are created equally, and the choice of targeted antigen is quite important. So not everything will look HER2-like, for example, which I guess is the poster child for ADCs. Sorry. Thank you, Leon.
To follow up with ADC, obviously, in addition to cytotoxic payload, there's many other payloads, such as like immunostimulating. Fortunately, there's some setback from Silverback. But in addition to that, people also put, let's say, radiopharmaceuticals. That's another bigger area. And also, people are trying to apply ADC to non-oncology. I remember they used to have a program, and there's many others also doing something like that, including Duality. What's your thoughts on those kind of a next generation, out of box ADCs?
Yeah, no, I think again another great question. I think the concept of precise delivery of things which can cause cell death is clearly validated. So topoisomerase, which is the kind of in thing, is standard of care in multiple tumor types. So it's a completely rational thing to do. I think delivering radiation also is a very rational thing to do. We've seen this with companies like Novartis trailblazing with things like Pluvicto, where they're delivering lutetium-177, which is a beta-emitting radionuclide that can, again, create local cell death. And then companies now pivoting to alpha emitters, which have a shorter path length. There's those of you that might remember your physics at high school, which can have some safety benefits, and those people are looking at actinium-225. So again, I think that was probably what drove Lilly to look at the Point Therapeutics deal that was announced earlier this week. So again, very, very rational. The immunostimulatory agents, I would say, again, is a worthwhile experiment. My knowledge of the current data sets to date have been that they've needed to be combined still with checkpoint inhibitors. So less monotherapy, I think, than things which cause catastrophic cell death, like chemotherapy or radiation.
Right. So this question is from the live audience. It's in the QM box, and it's really kind of a wonderful point you mentioned. This is Tao Lam from Sinner K, and the question is, as you mentioned, Chris, the culture fit is important. Can you please share your view on how that influenced the partnership between Big Pharma and the Chinese biotech?
Yeah. So how would I define culture? So obviously knowing the partner, people that you think you can have a long-standing, trusting relationship with, I think is really important. I think this tends to come out as you get into the weeds of the licensing discussions, the partnering discussions, as you come up with a clinical development plan. Can you align easily, for example, on the disease area to be investigated? Do you have the strategy to develop that globally? Each party's strengths. So if it's a local Chinese company, will they leverage the networks in China with the big hospitals and allow the partner to run some of the studies in ex-China territories? So I think that really forces the culture point, how ambitious, but at the same time realistic the partners are. Do you want to run 2 phase 3 studies in parallel versus sequentially? Are there de-risking steps? So I think it comes out there, and just being aligned on what the gating things are to unlock value. And I think that's where you work out very quickly if you have cultural alignment. If one party thinks something has a potential which is, you know, orders of magnitude different, that's not a good starting point. So I think that's particularly important. I think having senior people actually on both sides is quite important, that can kind of bulldoze and troubleshoot for the teams. So even though the contract might have the concept of a joint steering committee, I think great cultural alignment at senior levels in the organization is important, because once you align at that level, then things become quite easy for the teams below to execute on.
All right, so this is going to be a last question from the live audience. This is a Bean from a VC fund called Prox VC. Her question is, how GSK think of rare diseases? Any criteria used for product technology selection for licensing? If we consider ODD drugs, I'm not sure what ODD means, if she can clarify.
Yeah, maybe orphan drug designation, perhaps. Rare disease. One thing I've learned is that sometimes rare disease drugs can have long durations of therapy. Sometimes they can be curative, and I think we do have an interest in these spaces. There's obviously different grades as well of rare diseases. Something ultra rare where you can count the people globally on your kind of fingers and toes. That's quite specialist, I would say, and is not a great fit with the pharma model, where scale operational capability can kick into global phase 3 studies. But if things are in the rare disease category, where you do need scale still globally, then I would say yes, that's a good fit. Fantastic.
So this is going to be our last 2 questions, and one of them you already answered, which is how to reach out to GSK. You already show a very nice slide. There's a QR code. I think we're going to share the replay. People can always go there and contact you. And you also said you'll be happy to take some direct the messaging, and I'm very happy to be the person relay the message, and they can also contact us if they have a really compelling stories. But I don't want to end up the story with the all business. I want to have a little bit of personal touch, because a lot of people in the audience really I would say get inspired by your career path. So if you look at your career path, I just look at LinkedIn, you start as a biopharma career and AstraZeneca as a research chemist. Right, you were there for about looking at about like 4 years, and then you switched to BD, and you never left ever since. And you took a little bit detour, right? As a BD track, you did like a little bit over 1 year IR, which was interesting. So with that being said, I think you are very successful. Doesn't matter from which direction you look at this. Would you please share a little bit tips to the young and hungry who want to be like you in the future, especially on the BD track? That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Good question. And so I entered into a pharmaceutical company directly from my PhD. I worked in the labs for 3 or 4 years, as Leon said, and I think that experience was critical to understand the fundamentals of the drug discovery process. being a small molecule chemist by training, I learned the kind of the design, make, test cycle, that kind of failing, learning from your failure and designing the next experiment. So it makes you quite resilient being in the lab. The thing that I found out in the lab quite quickly is I got a bit frustrated why the molecules I was making were not in clinical studies the next day and why they weren't on the market the day after. And so, being in a lab and seeing the four walls every day made me realize there was an entire machine outside of the chemistry lab. And so I was quite fortunate enough that a role appeared on the job board in 2007. And I worked on academic business development actually for quite a number of years of my career. So quite low value, but high volume collaboration. So working with universities, tech transfer offices around the world. And this was a great learning in basic contracting, material transfer agreements, sponsored research agreements. I even put studentship agreements in place. So I got to see the ins and outs of a contract, which being a scientist, I had no legal training. So very much on the job learning. And then the role evolved into more senior roles. I would say tips I would give my younger self, if that's a way of putting your question, Leon, definitely don't be scared to be thrown in the deep end. Be prepared to figure things out. I would say as well, be very fact-based. One thing I've learned is it only takes a single bad assumption to destroy a business case or an idea. So don't be scared to hold people to account. Sometimes people might have a crazy cost of goods assumption. It might be that the duration of therapy is wrong. It might be the epidemiology. So holding teams to account, to be very transparent about the assumptions that drive investment decisions and the modeling of a particular opportunity. Obviously for early stage science, it's more about what could this be, what could it achieve, that curiosity, listening to the party, having a two-way dialogue. I'm a big fan of debate by exchange, so I like debating with VCs quite often, actually, what things are they not investing in and why as well. So yeah, there are a couple of things I would say, Leon.
Sounds like how to say good faith, collegial but a rigorous debate is very important, right? To get the best idea. All right, with that being said, thank you so much. And before you leave, I also want to do a little bit plug-in of the future episode. And Chris already shared a little bit light. We're going to have an incoming panel going to be on Wednesday, second Wednesday of November on ADC. And Chris, you are welcome to join as the audience, ask great questions. I'll make sure a question get answered. So, they're going to be two colleagues, one from Merck, one from AstraZeneca, and also one colleague from Duality. You just mentioned your slide, and another from Chimin Ventures, one of the top biotech specialized VC fund in China. So it's going to be quite exciting. In the meantime, please follow Chris. If you have any great ideas, you can watch a replay. Probably in 48 hours, we can upload this through different platforms. You can go there, and also feel free to reach out to me and other organizers from either Insan Trust Community or Sapa GP if you want to have a further communication with Chris. And what else? With that being said, thank you so much, Chris, and thank you everyone around the world. I know. I hope you have a fantastic morning, night, or day, or have a cup of coffee in the morning, cup of tea in the afternoon, or have some milk before you go to sleep. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you everyone for dialing today, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Leon. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.